Against the backdrop of the pandemic and ensuing lockdown the world finds itself currently in the grips of, many businesses and even some entire industries are struggling to stay afloat. This includes the movie theater industry, which employs over 150,000 workers across the United States alone. On April 2nd, The Wrap reported that AMC Theaters had its credit rating reduced, with its status going from highly speculative to default imminent with little prospect of recovery, which is finance speak for the market believes AMC is about to go broke and there is virtually nothing that can be done to prevent it. Underlining that, analysts expect that the theater chain will remain closed through June, which means it will not have the assets required to recover once the global health crisis is over. How could AMC, one of the largest theater chains in the US, suddenly find itself on the brink of extinction?
A story of greed, sex, and murder.
In this video, we'll take a brief look at the history of AMC Theaters, how the company has tried to adapt in the changing media landscape, and finally, if there's a future for them in the post-streaming world. Founded in 1920 by the traveling performers Maurice, Edward, and Barney Dubinsky, AMC started when the brothers bought the Regent Theater in Kansas City, Missouri. During that time, the Dubinsky brothers would change their names to Durwood, and subsequently, they also renamed the theater into the Durwood Theater. Perhaps not coincidentally, the theater had been owned previously by another performer, one Stanley Durwood, who had fallen on hard times himself as an actor in a traveling tent show. In 1961, Edward Durwood's son, Stanley H. Durwood, would take over the Durwood Theaters, now a small chain of 10 theaters. While looking at the box office receipts for his Kansas City theater, the Roxy, he had a brainstorm. Durwood realized if he added an additional screen to each theater, he could conceivably double his profits without having to hire additional staff. He did just that. From there followed the first multiplex, the Parkway Theater Complex in Kansas City, which opened in 1962. In 1968, he would change the name from the Durwood Theaters to the American Royal Cinema Company. During the incorporation process, he would change the name again, this time to American Multi-Cinema Incorporated. Stanley H. Durwood, being an Air Force veteran, applied a more military-like discipline to running the company, and the shortened named AMC soon became the most used one. The movie industry quickly embraced the concept of the multiplex, as did theater owners. It gave them the ability to draw bigger crowds and reduce reliance on movies that might prove to be a financial failure. During the 1980s, AMC started to expand overseas. AMC opened the Tamworth and Dudley Theaters in the UK. Dudley would be later taken over by United Cinema International, or UCI. UCI later would become part of AMC's financial misfortunes, but we're not there just yet. In the 1990s, AMC would be at the forefront of another movement that would revolutionize moviegoing, the Megaplex. The first Megaplex was actually opened in 1988 by the Belgian chain Cinépolis. Inspired by that, AMC would in 1995 open their first Megaplex in Dallas, Texas, the AMC Grand. Soon, Megaplexes would pop up all over North America as AMC continued to expand their footprint at home and abroad. AMC Theaters would continue to modernize the moviegoing experience, striking deals with such companies as Sony to upgrade all of their theaters to digital projection and even introduce amenities like in-theater dining at some of its larger complexes. Though AMC Theaters would continue to expand its operations in both the US and globally, its fortunes and eventually misfortunes would be tied across the Pacific to the Far East and the Middle Kingdom. When Stanley H. Durwood passed away in 1999, his successor, Peter Brown, became the first person outside of the Durwood family to run the company. During his tenure, AMC was acquired by the J.P. Morgan Chase subsidiary J.P. Morgan Partners LLC and private investors Apollo Management for $2 billion. A new corporate parent company was formed called Marquee Holdings. The next few years would be good ones for both AMC, its newly formed parent company, and their ultimate owners, right up until a whole slew of bubbles burst in the subprime and housing markets, plunging the world into a financial crisis in the latter half of 2008. In being one of those companies that had caused or otherwise contributed to this collapse, J.P. Morgan Chase would receive a $25 billion bailout from the United States government. Other companies who merely fell prey to the ripple effects of the bursting bubbles received no such bailout. So AMC's other ultimate owner, Apollo, continued to raise money from its end investors to cover the rising debt of its overall operations. They were very keen to sell their stake in AMC, and an interested buyer would soon arise. In the aftermath of the financial crisis, a new player would emerge from the Far East. Hollywood increasingly had been turning its eye towards China, whose economy had boomed while Western economies declined. With a population of over 1.5 billion, many of whom had moved up to the middle class courtesy of the new industrial jobs the West had outsourced to them. The Chinese movie-going public was an attractive prize for Hollywood. However, China was also looking to gain traction into the American movie industry themselves. In 2012, the Chinese investment firm the Wanda Group, headed by CEO Wang Zhailin, bought a majority stake in AMC Entertainment. The Wanda Group would also make investments in Legendary Pictures and partner with Sony Pictures. Some analysts questioned why the Wanda Group would buy AMC Theaters. Even with the Chinese movie market expanding, it would seem to make more sense for Wanda to build their own cinemas rather than buying an American chain. The purchase may have been, according to industry and entertainment consultant Robert Kane for Pacific Bridge Pictures, a company, it should be noted, has as their mission statement to focus on originating and developing entertainment projects that involve the Chinese market, to turn soft Chinese money into US dollars. Another reason could very well have been to gain a foothold in not so much the theaters themselves, but in the real estate they occupy. AMC could also have served to secure funding for various film projects in China for the global market. There also may have been other more nefarious reasons at work, as the Chinese authorities have been rumored to be interested in exerting cultural influence across the world through Hollywood productions. Assuming for the moment this is the case, there are rumors which suggest that the Wanda Group CEO Wang Zhailin may have used the purchase of AMC to ingratiate himself to the party leaders in China. Wang's rise in the business world was linked closely to a man named Bo Xilai. Although Wang has denied he had any personal association with Bo and stated theirs was a working relationship and nothing more. Be that as it may, Bo Xilai was certainly a man of influence. He was the mayor of the Chinese city of Dalian and later the governor of Liaoning. For Bo Xilai, the sky was the limit, as he was a rising star within the Chinese Communist Party, which just might have something to do with him being the son of Bo Yibo, who was called one of the 8 party elders. That's a trajectory that shouldn't be possible to mess up, but Bo Xilai nonetheless found a way. In 2012, allegations surfaced that Bo's associate Xu Ming had negotiated for Bo to have sex with Chinese actress and Crouching Tiger Hidden Dragon star Zhang Xi for the sum of $1.2 million. Xu would later negotiate on behalf of Bo to have sex with Zhang for the sum of $2 million, with the two apparently meeting 11 times in Beijing between 2007 and 2010. ABC News reported that according to Apple Daily Hong Kong, Zhang had amassed nearly $100 million in a sex-for-hire ring with some of China's most rich and powerful, arranged by Bo's associate Xu Ming. Zhang denied the allegations and subsequently sued the publication. The High Court sided with Zhang, ordering the publication to pay her legal fees. For Bo, the scandal would later seem like a walk in the park. His winning streak ended when he was implicated in the Wang Lijian incident. Back in November of 2011, Bo's wife and her associate had apparently murdered British businessman Neil Hayward, and on top of that, attempted to destroy evidence by way of fabricating a police report claiming that Hayward had died of his own accord from alcohol poisoning. This caused something of a scandal for several reasons, such that even Bo's chief of police, Wang Lijian, then attempted to defect to the American consulate in the city of Chengdu. Wang Lijian arrived at the US consulate with a police report in hand, along with a sample of Hayward's flesh that he had carved out of his corpse as it laid on the mortuary table, as both evidence and to provide a sample for a toxicology analysis. Wang Lijian would surrender himself to Chinese authorities within 24 hours and would be sentenced to 15 years for defection, abuse of power, bribe-taking, and corruption. Wang Lijian would, in an official account, accuse Bo of attempting to cover up the murder, something which would cause a political scandal and possibly damage China's national interests. Bo himself would stand trial for taking bribes, embezzlement, and his own abuse of power. While maintaining his innocence, Bo was sentenced to life in prison. The Communist Party nonetheless remained in play, and Robert Kane of Pacific Bridge Pictures suggests Wanda Group's purchase of AMC might essentially have been a gift to the Communist Party in China, as a means to make further inroads to spread what's been called soft power into the West. Not content with their stake in AMC and subsequent influence in the US, the Wanda Group CEO Wang Zhailin also sought to increase Chinese influence closer to home when the group effectively declared war on Disney by building a rival park in Nanchang. Eventually, though, there would be pushback to their expansion. In November of 2016, there were two significant developments that had occurred. One was that AMC closed its deal to acquire Odeon and the earlier mentioned UCI Cinema Holdings for $1.2 billion. With that, the Wanda Group's AMC Theaters had become the largest cinema chain in the world, bar none. The other significant development was Donald J. Trump was elected as the 45th President of the United States. Midnight's Edge is not a political channel, nor do we actively take political sides. However, his stance on not just China, but policy on Chinese investments in the US is well known, and this would prove detrimental to the Wanda Group's operations in the US. The problem was actually twofold. On the one hand, Trump's rhetoric and ensuing legislation made it increasingly difficult to have fresh cash transferred from China, and that was something the Wanda Group needed a lot of. CEO Wang Shailin hadn't just bought AMC Theaters, he had gone on a wild spending spree, acquiring hotels, New York real estate, and sports teams around the world. In doing so, he had built up an enormous amount of debt that had to be repaid, and because of the overspending, that simply could not be done without regular infusions of fresh cash, straight from China. In an attempt to lobby, Wang had asked MPAA CEO Chris Dodd to convey to the then president-elect that with over 20,000 jobs at stake in the United States, it wasn't a good idea to limit Chinese investment into film and television. In an even more direct attempt to lobby, Wang told the media, "I told him to tell Mr. Trump that I have $10 billion of investments in the United States and more than 20,000 employees there who wouldn't have anything to eat should things be handled poorly, and nothing else mattered." But Trump wasn't the only worry. As we said, the problem was twofold. By July of 2017, Wang found himself in trouble with the Chinese government for breaching regulations on foreign investments. He had simply bitten off more than they were comfortable chewing. A document that surfaced said that the Agricultural Bank of China was forbidden from lending money to 6 of Wanda's overseas companies, which indicates that for whatever reason, China had no intention of throwing more good money after bad. For the record, it should be noted that AMC issued a denial that any money coming from the parent company, the Wanda Group, was used in any of its most recent expansion, and claimed that Wanda was not involved in the day-to-day operations of the theater chain beyond its board of directors. Under the specter of increasing debt, the Wanda Group sold its theme park business for $9.3 billion to Sunac China, but this did little more than buy them time. A little over a year later, with debt still mounting, Wang would sell a stake in AMC Theaters to private equity firm Silver Lake for $600 million, roughly half of what he had paid for it, so at a significant loss. Making matters worse, the sale wasn't an all-cash transaction, which Wang no doubt would have preferred instead. Instead, AMC issued $600 million in the form of unsecured convertible notes, which would not be due until the year 2024. Approximately $421 million would be used by AMC to buy back 24 million shares of its own stock. $160 million would be used to pay a special dividend to Class A and Class B stockholders. Making matters worse, the revenue from audiences going to the movies was also in a steady state of decline. AMC lost $54.8 million last year, down from $100 million the year before. But on the bright side, the AMC stub service looked as though it might soon be profitable. Unfortunately, external events ironically also tied in with China would soon wipe out any bright side one can think of. When the true scale of the pandemic started hitting, the stock markets around the world crumbled, especially the stocks related to theaters directly and indirectly, meaning the value of AMC dropped, as did all the holdings Wanda could have liquidated to pay off debts. Then AMC started to drop, eventually reaching zero. In early March, studios began to announce that their upcoming slate of movies would be delayed due to the global health crisis. MGM announced that the new James Bond movie, No Time to Die, would be pushed back from April to November. Then on March 16th, in response to the growing crisis, AMC CEO Adam Aron announced it would close their theaters for 6 to 12 weeks in order to ensure the safety of its patrons and its workers. On March 25th, AMC would furlough 600 corporate employees, including CEO Adam Aron himself. On April 3rd, CNET reported that Disney pushed back its entire slate of Marvel films, with their film Artemis Fowl headed to Disney+. And the upcoming film Trolls World Tour from Universal would skip theaters entirely. Warner Brothers would also push back their tentpole Wonder Woman 1984 until August. With theaters already struggling, the National Association of Theater Owners would fire a veritable warning shot at studios. As NATO President John Fithian said of Universal's Trolls World Tour going direct to streaming, exhibitors will not forget this. However, there was little that Fithian or NATO could do. With the changing entertainment landscape and the new streaming platforms rapidly evolving, On April 5th, AMC had their credit rating downgraded from highly speculative to default imminent by Standard & Poor's, with S&P analysts expecting the chain to remain closed through June. Analysts also speculated that the chain would not have enough liquidity to recover once the crisis has passed. On April 11th, AMC entered into talks to hire the law firm of Weil and Gottschall, signaling that the chain, the largest theater exhibitors in the world, may be closer to filing bankruptcy. Entertainment pundit John Campea, who used to host the show AMC Movie Talk, said in his podcast while things for AMC look dire, they may survive. This is in line with what Deadline reported on April 7th when they claimed that even if the chain were to file for bankruptcy, it wouldn't necessarily spell doom for the company, which is true. Huge corporations don't go broke the same way smaller companies do. The infrastructure is already there, so like in the aftermath of any bubble, a new buyer could come in and buy the entire business at a time when it might be undervalued. Campea even suggested who such a buyer might be, namely Amazon. Though AMC is seemingly teetering on the brink of financial collapse, a silver lining emerged from Washington. On March 27th, the United States Congress passed the CARES Act, a $2 trillion financial bailout bill. At the time of making this video, it is unclear as to when or how much of that relief package AMC would receive. It's also still unknown what form the industry will take, with a new emphasis on streaming, when the current crisis abates, or if audiences will still have the appetite for movies in a post-pandemic world. For AMC Theaters and the movie and entertainment industry, a perfect storm arose. Whether they ride out the storm or are swept up by it still remains to be seen. Let us know what you think in the comments.